Thanks for stopping by my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and we are the Astrology Star Sisters. Welcome, Madam Simon. It's good to have you back.
Thank you, Liz. It's good to be back.
And we're going to talk about the new moon forecast for Scorpio. So exciting. And Madam Simon is an archetypal astrologer, tarot reader, and visionary artist. And you can reach her at her website, iconalchemy.com. I'm an astrologer, author, intuitive, and tarot reader, and you can reach me at alightpath.com. So we have the Scorpio new moon, and we have an image here that Madam Simon created that's lovely and to me very much represents Scorpio. Do you want to tell us about your image?
I do multiple kinds of art. This one is a photo manipulation, a digital alteration of a photo that I took, actually of treetops on Bainbridge Island many years ago. So yes, and then I just sort of rework it digitally and make it look interesting.
Well, thank you for letting us use your image this month. And how I use the new moon energy is from the balsamic moon to the new moon, I write what I would wish to release gently and easily with harm to none. And then at the new moon to the first sliver of the moonlight, I work on my new moon desires or intentions. And then when that sliver of the moonlight is there, Diana's bow, then I light a candle to ignite my intentions. And Madam Simon, will you share what you do?
So I look at the new moon as this time to kind of just sit there and incubate intention within the darkness of the new moon. And yes, if I'm actually going to consciously think, oh, this is what I'm going to do for this lunation and I want to do something about it, then sure, waiting till that first sliver of moonlight is what would actually make sense for any of us who do ritual work, or wish to offer prayers at that time, set intentions, any of that kind of thing. You actually get them going with that first sliver of moonlight. But while it's still dark, that's the time for, incubating, meditating on what it is that you're associating with this lunation. And honestly, for me, it's kind of like during that balsamic phase and into the new moon, I'm already looking ahead to what's about to happen. And so there's ideas that are percolating based on the archetypes that are going on in the transits. And that's going to start seeding that incubation material for me.
Thank you for sharing that. So we're in Scorpio energy. Scorpio's of the fixed modality, about stability, security, dedicated, immovable, and stubborn. The ruling planet is Mars, the traditional ruler, and Pluto, the modern transcendental ruler. Scorpio's of the water element, and that's about being private, intuitive, emotional, and our subconscious. The mantra is I transform or I desire. And would you like to share some keywords, Madam Simon?
So some keywords are transformative, regeneration, death and rebirth. Scorpio is often considered to be intense, passionate, concerned with power. It is perceptive, resourceful, and mysterious. And some of the cautions are obsessive, compulsive, destructive, vengeful. That last part is one of the common stereotypes about Scorpio. Yeah. So.
And then here's the chart for the new moon in Seattle. So Pacific Standard Time on November 19th at 10:48 p.m., which we're just about an hour and a half before that as we're recording, because we tried to record earlier, but I was having a lot of technical problems today with my computer, but we finally got on, so we're happy to be here and sharing with everybody today. So those moon aspects are the moon is conjunct the sun, Mercury retrograde, and Lilith. Mercury retrograde is Cazimi to the moon and sun. That this new moon is sextile Pluto, trine Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Ceres, and opposite Uranus and Sedna. So, what kind of jumps out at you, Madam Simon?
So there's actually one thing in particular I would like to mention before I really get into these aspects, is that there's actually a little trio of trans-Neptunian objects that are all conjoined by this new moon as well. Now, if we actually put them into the chart, you wouldn't be able to read anything because it would be so jammed with stuff. But so there's this pile up that is happening in Scorpio. The trans-Neptunian objects in question are Jivana, Typhon, and Deucalion. So they are all pretty closely conjoined by this new moon. And then we've got that Mercury Cazimi that's happening just a few hours after the new moon. And so this new moon is actually within Mercury is within the degree to be Cazimi at the time of the new moon. So that's pretty unusual right there. And then you add Lilith to the mix, and now that really adds to that like power and depth of this darkness of the new moon. And it's one of those things that we live in a society that loves to kind of get judgy about the light and dark polarity, but darkness is in and of itself is not a bad thing, just as light in and of itself is not a good thing, right? They're just natural forces, right? And so the darkness of this we can look at as being very internal, okay? Very much this space of being introspective, of being willing to look into what is deep and mysterious in our lives, in our feelings, especially in the power dynamics around us. And then at the same time, there is the brightness of the Cazimi in operation. So there's really this amazing sense of wholeness to this new moon, that it is both about having that logical perception of Mercury Cazimi, the brilliance of the sun, its light and heat somehow purifying Mercury is what the Cazimi is considered to represent. And so this is like, it gives a really intense depth and breadth at the same time to our perceptions. Lilith expands our intuitions, and then we've got that trine, the trine to Jupiter, the trine to Saturn and Neptune, and then by degree Ceres as well. But in particular, those water trines really amp up our intuition. Okay. And also the depth of our feelings. And, because Scorpio is very much concerned with what is underneath the surface of things, we may be processing deep feelings that we're not so consciously aware of, but then that Cazimi can bring amazing conscious insights to go with that. The opposition to Uranus, of course, brings the potential for surprises, like we were having with tech earlier. I swear, anybody out there listening, it was a series of things, one after another. So very in keeping with the surprise element. But also, when you've got Mercury in a hard aspect with Uranus, and Mercury in any aspect with Uranus is going to increase the potential to get these kind of sudden downloads, real flashes of information that that may come out of nowhere. Now you combine that with the the investigative nature of Scorpio. And that is really powerful. So this is a new moon that definitely favors researchers, investigative reporters, detectives. Even if you're not doing that kind of thing for your livelihood, it can still be, detective work like genealogy, for example. Especially with the trine to Jupiter, who is received by the moon. Okay. So that can put some emphasis on family and origins. Saturn puts emphasis on tradition, and structure. And so, yeah, this is like a really good time to do things like dig into our roots, to understand our own psychological depths. This is a great time for doing therapeutic work, doing journaling, in order to understand our own psyche. That is also something that could be very useful at this time. Dream work, especially, with both Mercury, the psychopomp, the messenger between worlds, and Neptune involved. And of course, the moon, that combination, that's very powerful for doing dream work. So yeah, this is this is quite an incredible new moon. I love it.
Yes, and things can come to the surface and turn out in a different way that maybe you even hoped or expected, So,
Yeah. Also, that sextile to Pluto is a nice little subtle thing there to help us. It can actually help us feel like we are being regenerated, boosted, rejuvenated by this new moon. So that's also very lovely.
thank you for sharing that. So we're going to go on to the water grand trine that forms two kites. So the two focal points will be Uranus and Pluto. So, and you kind of briefly talked about these trines, but go ahead and share some more with us, please.
Sure. So I mentioned those trans-Neptunian objects that are part of this, and Lilith, also a part of this. Lilith has been kind of the placeholder in this grand trine that's been actually going on for the past few months. Previously it was Jupiter trine the North Node in Pisces, and trine Lilith in Scorpio. And then as these various planets, Mercury, Mars, the Sun, and now also Venus have all moved into and or through Scorpio, they've each entered into that grand water trine as Jupiter was moving forward and forming the trine with Saturn. Okay, so it's been shifting over the past few months. And then, like I said, there's those trans-Neptunian objects that are all in late degrees of Scorpio at the moment. I believe they're all at 28 degrees of Scorpio. So right under that new moon, right, conjoining it, right? So Giovanna is named for a Slavic goddess of the spring associated with the herb mullein, which is useful for the lungs. And Typhon is, this kind of primordial being associated with, kind of this fiery eruptive force, also literally typhoons. So a kind of a both a stormy and volcanic kind of nature to that trans-Neptunian object. And then Deucalion is a Greek figure akin to Noah, the son of Prometheus, but associated with saving, restarting humanity after a flood, and therefore can be considered to be kind of represents a backup plan, shall we say, which is very nice when we're dealing with Mercury retrograde shenanigans. So all three of those in Scorpio are adding to both the intensity and the power of this new moon. Also, we're mentioning some kites here. We've got one with, Uranus at the head and the new moon in that Scorpio cluster all at the tail, kind of trying to steer the kite while, Uranus, this desire for change, this impetus toward change and toward liberty is, showing the direction we're going, right? Or that we're trying to steer toward. Pluto, on the other hand, if we're looking at that as the head of the kite, with Jupiter, our faith, our hope, our optimism, trying to steer that kite, while Pluto is showing us there's some stuff in society that needs to be transformed big time, right? And in whatever area of our life is represented by that Aquarius placement of Pluto. What you also don't see here, there's another trans-Neptunian object that is just across the line into Capricorn at 29 degrees. And so is conjoining that Pluto at the head of that kite. And that TNO, trans-Neptunian object, is Iran, who is a Welsh otherworldly god who is associated with the wild hunt, with bringing lost souls home to his paradisical kingdom of Anwen. And so I find that interesting within the context of this kite, because, when we look at Pluto's significations in astrology, certainly he's an underworld deity, but can definitely relate to, to power and to sometimes corruption, to things that do need to be transformed, to things that are rotten, okay, and that need to be composted. And so there is this kind of this flavor of a life after this one, a society after this one. What are we transforming society into? Are we going to have something very radically different at the end of it, right? Which is what, both Pluto in Aquarius and that Uranus at the head of the other kite are looking forward to, right? They're both trying each other. They have a relationship with each other, okay? So they're in cahoots. They're wanting to steer us toward a very different future, right? And we can certainly look at that as being something a little scary, because Pluto can be a little scary sometimes. And yet I feel like Iran, who is now applying to a conjunction with Pluto, is going to, cross over that last degree of Capricorn into Aquarius. Iran is the reminder that it doesn't have to be an awful thing to transform the society into something better. It could be something really good if we choose to work toward that, to put in the effort to make it that way. All of these outer planets that are having relationships with each other, we can see they're all in these harmonious relationships. One of the things about that, whether it's a trine or a sextile, or in this case, the configuration of these kites, we have to be willing to put in the elbow work. Okay. It is very easy with supportive aspects to go, oh yeah, there's this kind of lovely energy about, isn't that nice? And not really do much of anything with it. And then, when, a more challenging energy comes up, we get kind of, blindsided. We're like, I wish I could have done something about that. Well, maybe we could have. Maybe we could have laid some groundwork while we had these lovely aspects. So, it doesn't mean that everything's all hunky-dory in the world. We already know that. There's all kinds of crazy things going on. But this combination of aspect patterns is reminding us that the big forces at work in the world are not automatically against us. They may be something that we can actually harness in order to do good things in the world and to make a better society and make better lives for ourselves and make better lives for our communities. That grand water trine involving Jupiter in Cancer is home and family oriented, right? Pisces is, the whole web of life. And Scorpio is the power dynamics at work underneath the surface of all of it. And are we willing to do the deep work within ourselves? Are we willing to transform what we believe about the world based upon our intuitions and our feelings and our, what are our ethics surrounding all of it? If there are things that to be confronted here that may be challenging, certainly one of them is what's our ethical framework? Scorpio very much has, this intensity of will that says, the ends justify the means, but we can see awful things can happen when we say that. So now we each have to decide for ourselves, what are our ethics surrounding these things that we feel about home and family and community and world. So that certainly may be challenging, but oh, look, we've got that Mercury Cazimi there to help us figure it out. And Mercury's gonna do another Cazimi when it comes back around, right? Not in Scorpio. But, this is the second of a trio of Cazimis. So we have been getting insights, if we choose to acknowledge them, right? And so this is part of that long process. I mean, the wonderful thing about it is we're not having to necessarily make big decisions right away. This is giving us time to kind of work through things based on how we feel. But this lunation in particular, this lunar cycle that we are embarking upon with this new moon, this is an invitation to really, do our shadow work, do our deep psychological work, understand what makes us tick so that we can better understand how we are working with everybody else.
And I would pay attention to my dreams, and I would suggest everybody else pay attention to their dreams, especially tonight, but even for the next few weeks. And a lot of information can come through that would be very helpful.
Yeah. This is a time when you want to make sure that you have, a pad of paper and writing implement next to your bed, or, something that you can record, to be able to just, when you wake up from a dream, to not forget it, to not lose it, but to actually write down or record your insights about what you're getting, and then look at it later, make it some good useful information.
Absolutely. Then we go into a Thor's hammer. We have Jupiter square Chiron and Eris, and they are all sesquiquadrate Mars. And you've helped me learn a lot about Thor's hammer, but go ahead.
Yeah, so so Mars is, first of all, Mars is in the home sign of Jupiter. Okay, so answering to Jupiter, and Chiron and Eris are in the home sign of Mars, answering to Mars. And that Jupiter is in the home sign of the moon, answering to our new moon. Okay. So, there's this really, one of the things about this particular new moon and all these various aspect patterns that we're seeing is there's just these lovely reminders of how interconnected everything is. Okay. Now, a Taurus hammer is, it's got that square at the base, and then it's got these two sesquiquadrates. Sesquiquadrates are a square and a half. So they have a similarly challenging nature to a square, but that extra, half square may make it a little easier for us to integrate the energies. Okay. And so there is challenge here, and there can be pressure. The pressure is being exerted upon Mars. And so therefore there is pressure upon our willpower and our energy and our drive to action. Okay. And remember that Mars not only rules that Aries that Chiron and Eris are in, but also rules our new moon and that whole pileup in Scorpio. Okay. So Mars is doing a lot of duty here. Right. And it's Mars in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is idealistic. Can be, Mars in Sagittarius can be very much driven by belief. Okay. And Mercury has just, passed through here retrograde. After doing again the second of a trio of conjunctions with Mars. The first one was in Scorpio back at the beginning of Scorpio season, and then we had this retrograde conjunction with Mars in Sagittarius. Okay, and then we will have another back when, or again when Mercury goes direct. So so we've had this kind of Mercury going through Sagittarius has encouraged us to examine our beliefs, how our beliefs inform our communication, our thoughts, our ideas are informed by belief. And, then to reconsider, what is it we believe, and is that actually helping us right now, or does that need to be reworked a little bit? Okay. So now Mars is taking up that Sagittarian torch, right? Okay, so we're looking at our beliefs a little bit here. Now, how are we going to act in response to that? And Mars, of course, like I said, is under a lot of pressure because of the Taurus hammer. Now, one of the things to remember about a Taurus hammer is that it can bring up so much pressure that we feel like almost survival level fear. Okay, where we're like, I feel threatened. Okay, even if I'm not. The problem with that in Sagittarius is that that can correspond to fanatical kinds of responses to things that we're perceiving as threats, but which may not actually be threats. So it's really important not to go off half-cocked at the moment, especially with all of the passion and intensity of a Scorpio new moon that is ruled by that Mars. Okay. And remember that the moon governs our instinctive behaviors, our knee-jerk reactions to things, what we do before we've thought about it, typically as a result of early childhood conditioning. Okay. So, when we're looking at the moon in Scorpio, where the moon is considered to be in fall, the moon is kind of poorly resourced to do what it does best. It's feeling very intense, very passionate, very, can go a little off the rails emotionally. Okay. Now, when you've got that as people's instinctive responses, things can get a bit messy. Okay. And especially since, Mercury's going to be hanging out in there, doing the retrograde thing. Mercury and Scorpio can be kind of have that scorpion sting to the things that we say, right? So if it seems like people are being a bit wacky around you, take a deep breath. Okay. and recognize this is the landscape that we're going through. And we don't have to look at it like it's torturous or anything like that, but instead, okay, there are deep things that we need to be paying attention to, deep processes. There are power dynamics that we might not have previously been aware of that we should be paying attention to. There are emotions that people are feeling underneath the surface of things that they may hide very, very well under usual conditions. And then it spills out when we're in a situation like this, or conversely, somebody who is maybe normally more used to sharing their feelings now clams up because they're feeling like, suspicious and threatened and all that. So it's important to recognize that people may be behaving in ways that, might seem problematic, but really we're all struggling to process our own stuff, right? Everybody's got something going on, whether you can see it or not. And so this is a time when we're getting greater awareness that that is the case. And that grand water trine that we saw before is potentially giving us a little bit more sympathy for all of that. So now it's time to exercise that sympathy. And that doesn't mean that we, let ourselves be led down the garden path, right? But rather that we strive to use this Mars in Sagittarius that is feeling so much pressure to act in a way that reflects our ideals, but is not fanatically driven and reactive and, potentially abusive or harmful.
Thank you. That's great. I love it. So we have a T square with the nodes square Juno.
So Juno is, the queen of heaven. She's Jupiter's counterpart. She is very much concerned with, she relates to marriage. She relates to childbirth, but also to, the promises we make, the commitments we make, the institutions we wish to uphold, the long-term connections with other people that we have that matter to us enough that we are willing to compromise, that we are willing to not always get our way. Okay. And so Juno can also therefore relate to the social fabric, the social contract. Okay. And when she is, any planet, or, in this case, a dwarf planet, or asteroid, that is, at this square, forming this T square with the nodes, is said to be at the bendings of the nodes. And it can seem like the topics of that planet are a distraction from our karmic path. Okay. The nodes, we've got the south node is kind of where we're comfortable, where we've been, what it is that we're very familiar with. And then the north node is what we're going toward. Okay. Where we have a hunger to learn more, but can also be a little uncertain about all that, right? Humans can be very change averse. Okay. And so, there's that kind of push-pull between what is comfortable and what is going to encourage our learning and growth. Okay. And now here is Juno in this challenging position to both of those. And she's reminding us, okay, it's all well and good to go on this particular path of growth, but you need to remember that you still have some commitments. You need to remember that you have relationships, that it's not just you. There are other people who are involved, other people affected by your choices. And are you going to pay attention to that, or are you going to sit there and try to ignore that and then pay the consequences when things don't work out quite the way that you wanted to because you ignored that? Okay. And, Juno being in Jupiter's home sign of Sagittarius, she's being received by her husband. Okay. And so, there is this strong sense of, yes, there are commitments, but there are commitments that we have ideals about, that we have strong beliefs about. And so as we're going through, that process of, first Mercury and then Mars having, kind of made the belief stuff show up a bit more. Okay. And Jupiter in Cancer, particularly drawing attention to how our beliefs affect our emotional connections, our close friendships, our family, our immediate community. There's this dynamic at work where we're getting this extra focus on those who are closest to us and what we feel about them, but also what we believe, and how is that affecting all that, and is that going to be healthy or is it a problem? Remember, Jupiter in that Taurus hammer is square to Chiron and Eris, and Chiron and Eris in Aries very much relate to Chiron relates to wounds that are in an area of identity, of capability, our executive function. Lots of people have been experiencing severe burnout as a result of the things going on in our society at this time. And then Eris is like, yeah, this is a problem, and I'm going to do something disruptive to draw all of your attention to it. And now when you've got that squaring Jupiter, it can really bring up some of the toxic patterns within our families, within our close communities. And new moon in Scorpio, that's one of the things that does come up with moon in Scorpio is, okay, what are the really toxic emotional patterns? What are our obsessions, our compulsive behaviors, our reactive behaviors? What is the shadow stuff? Okay. So again, we see this interconnectedness between these aspect patterns. Asking us to be willing to pay attention to what we feel. Pay attention to what we feel and what is it that we believe about that. And maybe we should try to shift some of our beliefs to maybe make things so that we're not feeling so much toxic stuff, or that if we are, that we acknowledge the reasons for it. And then try to figure out, how do we construct a different framework, a different social fabric, make better commitments, axe the commitments that don't serve us. What are the commitments that are impeding our growth? We can have friends and loved ones that we care about very much, but really we need to only be around them in small doses, because doing otherwise impedes our own growth and health and well-being. And so those kinds of hard questions that we need to ask ourselves are being brought up here. Okay. And it doesn't mean that we don't care about people. It does mean that we have to come up with healthier interactions with them, or, limit our time.
And we all grow and change in different increments. So sometimes we grow apart and other times we grow together.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now we have a cradle, and I'll let you describe it because I was having a hard time with it earlier.
That's okay. So, the cradle is based on, there is an opposition going on here from the new moon and Mercury and Lilith and, that whole crew in Scorpio, opposite Uranus and Sedna. Okay. But despite the challenge of the opposition, we got a whole passel of supportive aspects that are, kind of forming what is underneath the surface of the opposition that is at the top of the cradle. Okay. And so when we've got an opposition, we've got heightened awareness because the planets can see each other very clearly, right? And so we have heightened awareness of of Uranus's drive to change. And at the same time, since Uranus is retrograde, Uranus's re-examination of the changes that have been made, and are they really serving our best purposes? Are they really encouraging our freedom, which Uranus is very concerned with, our liberation? Or are they just more of the same? Right? And Uranus, of course, can be disruptive, like Eris. Okay. Uranus, does like to kind of sometimes pull the rug out from under us and give us some interesting surprises. And especially opposing Mercury, those can be technological surprises, especially when it's Mercury retrograde. Uranus is very tech oriented, is very future oriented. And so even when Uranus is retrograde, there is that, if we're going to be examining things that have happened in the past, it's still with an eye to the future. Right. And so that opposition then, that the rest of the cradle is like trying to support, this, okay, what is it that you're seeing? What are the surprises, the disruptions that you need to think about as Mercury is reconsidering its way back through Scorpio? Okay. And Uranus is, of course, has retrograded back into Taurus. There has been corresponding seismic activity. Liz and I are in the Pacific Northwest, and Mount Rainier has been doing some interesting things over the past few days. Having this like kind of intense tremory thing, not like an earthquake, but definitely like there is stuff shifting deep beneath the earth. And I believe Kilauea has been erupting, which Kilauea did back in 2018. I believe it was May 15th. For some reason, that date sticks out in my head. When Uranus previously went into Taurus. So, you think about Uranus and Taurus. Taurus is the roots of the mountain going into the planet. It is stability. It is physicality. It is, our survival needs, right? And then Uranus likes to shake things up, but in a sign that is so stable, so fixed. How do you shake up something that is big and heavy like that? It may be through earthquakes, it may be through volcanic or seismic activity, but it's like a long, slow buildup to the sudden shift. Okay. And so certainly from an economic standpoint, there have been interesting shifts going on in recent years. And now Uranus retrograding back into Taurus is re-examining some of that. So we may see stuff come up that looks familiar when it comes to economic issues. And that can include the ongoing distribution issues, that started back around the time of the pandemic. I mean, technically we're still in a pandemic, which is I won't get into that. But those kinds of disruptions in our supply chains very much can relate to Uranus and Taurus. Now, as is the case with all things astrological, that doesn't mean like, panic, sky is falling, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean any of that. It does mean, pay attention to what are your structures, your material structures in your life, and how can you be adaptable if sudden seismic shifts happen that you weren't anticipating? Do you have backup systems? Oh, that goes back to that TNO I mentioned, Deucalion, okay, who is opposing Uranus at this time. Do you have backup systems? If you don't, maybe it would be a good idea to start putting some of that in place, okay? Remember that Uranus is conjoined the TNO Sedna, and Sedna, her story starts out with victimization, but moves into power. Okay. Oh, and interestingly enough, it's underwater power, very appropriate for our Scorpio new moon. Okay. So, anytime we're looking at all this, the potential disruptive stuff that we see with an opposition like this, we need to remember that this is an invitation for us to do the work that is going to help both strengthen us and keep us flexible despite the sometimes scary shifts that go on in our world. And then all of these other supportive aspects are giving us clues about things that we can do to help navigate the challenges of that opposition, right? So, as I mentioned, Uranus is trine Pluto. They are both going, we're supporting big change, big transformation here. Okay. You can either futilely resist it or you can harness it. You can work with it. You can figure out how are you going to make something good out of this for yourself and for others around you. The trine from the new moon to Neptune, I mean, that is lovely. That's powerful vision. Okay. Vision and hope and compassion, being willing to explore our spiritual side, to explore the spirituality of our emotional depths. And yes, dream work again. I can emphasize that as well. And Saturn being with Neptune there can give us long-term results from the things that we dare to dream now. So this cradle is just, again, it's more of that kind of incubation energy, right? What are the changes that we are seeking? What are the changes we're having to adapt to? And then how can we reframe our beliefs, our vision, our spiritual practice, and our feelings? How can we work with all of that in order to make the changes that are happening better for all concerned?
You described that really well. Thank you. I understand the cradle so much better now. So we have what's called a lunar phase family or a gestational phase. It uses the 4 lunar phases: new, first quarter, full, and last quarter. And each session or each phase lasts 9 months. And so for this new moon, we start it today. And so if you keep a journal or notes, what you begin in this new phase, the first quarter of that is usually adjustments, and that'll happen on August 19th, 2026 at 27 degrees Scorpio. Then the full phase to reap your rewards is May 20th, 2027, 29 degrees Scorpio and 13 minutes. And the third quarter phase will be February 17th of 2028 at 28 degrees Scorpio and 10 minutes. Because not every new moon to full moon, it's, a 2-week period that you can manifest a project or something that you're working on. So sometimes we need the longer phases. So I like to kind of keep track of these because it's really interesting to see, oh, I started this. And for me, of myself personally using these, some are more, there's more going on than other times. So, and I really haven't found anyone specifically works easier or better for me. So I just kind of pay attention to them all. And then we have a yearly lunar phase that we're starting today, and then the full Scorpio full moon will be May 1st of 2026 at 11 degrees Scorpio. So, Madam Simon, do you have anything to add to the yearly or the gestational phase?
Well, the only thing I really care to add is that, this is, there are a lot of these kinds of cycles within astrology, and tracking them over time can be useful in helping us to understand some of the processes that we've been going through. And with the moon relating so much to unconscious processes, paying attention to these dates then can give us insight into things that we weren't necessarily consciously aware of at the time. But then looking back, we can go, oh, yeah, that makes lots of sense, right?
Exactly. Well, I want to thank you, Madam Simon, for joining me today. And I want to thank our audience that has joined us live and those that come back and watch at a later date. And Simon's going to tell you about her Patreon page now.
So I write about the transits on Patreon, and about weekly do a piece of artwork that is based in a chosen transit. And then I, share it with my people there, and the actual patrons get a little bit more insight into what is going on behind a, a piece of artwork, and they get a little bit more data about the various transits. They get things a little more in advance than the rest of my audience there. And also I create custom artwork for individual patrons there, depending upon your tier level. So if that sounds like something that's of interest to you, feel free to join my community there. We'd love to see you. And like Liz, I am a consulting astrologer as well, and consulting tarot reader. And so if you're interested in scheduling a consultation with me, my website is iconalchemy.com.
And like Simon said, I do consultations. I have a newsletter and, of course, my YouTube channel. So I appreciate you following and liking. I have a variety of other shows with Astrology Star Sisters. Madam Simon and I will be back shortly in a few days or a week to do the Planets Direct for November. And on Friday, we will be back to do Astrology and Tarot with another Astrology Star Sister, Joy, joining us. And I will be on Talk Cosmos talking about the Sagittarius new moon, searching for eternal truth. I'm part of the Archetypal Symbols team, and you can tune in on Sunday, December 14th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I want to thank our sponsor, Astro Peregrine Software, an astrology software program for Mac and Windows, and you can find out more information about that at astroperegrine.com. And I want to thank Simon again for joining me, and I want to thank our audience, and we're going to sign off and say goodbye for now, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank
Thanks.
you.